What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about useEffect, a hook that allows us to do side effects inside function components. Side effects meaning data fetching, setting up a subscription, manually changing the DOM, stuff of that nature. In class components, for that we use lifecycle methods, such as component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount. But in function components, it's all done within one useEffect function. So this is the app we're going to be working with. It's a simple to-do app that renders to-dos and removes them on click. We built this app in useState Part 2 tutorial, and if you guys want to follow along, I'm gonna post a link to the repo in the description so that you can clone it and be on the same page with me. This app has two functions that provide its main functionality. It's handle add to do and handle delete to do. Handle add to do adds whatever we submit here to our state, which is an array. It's called to-do list, and handle delete to do removes whatever to do we click on from that array. So the first thing I'll do is instead of saving our to-do to our state, I'm gonna be persistent the to-do to the database. I'm gonna be using Firebase. If you guys are following along, then create a database and make sure your rules write and read are set to true, because I'm not going to be using Firebase API. I'm going to be using HTTP methods get and post, because I don't want to make it complicated. I want to make it as simple as possible. And for that same reason, maybe some of the things we will do in this app we will not be doing in the real world application, right? Because the main point of this video is just to demonstrate to you how useEffect works. So once we have our to-dos persisted to our database, then we can see how to use that wonderful hook useEffect. We're gonna see how we can fetch our to-dos when our component mounts. Then we'll see how we do another API call when our component updates. Then we'll see how we can change the DOM using the same useEffect. And the last thing we'll look at is how we can do the component cleanup when our component unmounts. Before we start, I'm going to remove the delete to do functionality because it's out of the scope for this video. If we're going to remove the to do, meaning if we click on to do, it gets removed from the local state but not from the database. And in that way, our local state and our database will not be in sync, and that will cause some weird behavior, some weird bugs. And we don't want that. Let me make sure everything's good. Okay, we'll click on it. Everything's still here, so no more delete functionality. We don't need it for our purpose. So the first thing I'll do is I'll declare a const URL. I'll just copy this URL, and then I'll say /todos.json. So this is the node we'll be posting to todos.json, and what Firebase allows us to do is if we're gonna make a post request on this URL and this node and it doesn't exist, Firebase lets us create it on the go. So it'll create it on the go, and that's what we need. So let's start with our handle add to do functionality. So instead of saving our to do, this thing, whatever we submit here, to our state, we're gonna make a post request to this URL to the database. We're gonna say fetch. We're gonna give it URL as the first argument. Second argument will be the object with method post body JSON.stringify, because we need to post it as a JSON. And here we send an object where title is the key and the value is our to do, whatever we submit to do. Okay, then we're gonna say then response.json, and catch an error and console it out. Okay, let's try. Let's post. Let's say it workout code sleep. Let's see. Yeah, we have our 4 to-dos that we posted and saved to our database. Now we need to create a function that will fetch our to-dos. We'll name it fetch to-dos. it'll be async arrow function. Let's wrap it in try catch block. Let's say const response res equals to await fetch URL. So we send request, a post request, get request to this URL. And then whatever we get, we save it to variable data. We'll say data equals to await response.res.json. And let's just console it. Console it out. Let's say console log data. And I'm pretty sure that you guys know that we can't just call this function right here, because the side effect for that in class components we use lifecycle method component did mount, but in function component for that we have useEffect. Let's bring it out. Let's bring useEffect from React, and here we'll just say useEffect, and we pass it a function as the first parameter, and that function is our actual side effect that we want to perform. So we say fetch to do's. And by the way, quick note, in the future this pattern will be replaced by React suspense, but for right now, as of March 2019, there's no data fetching solutions compatible with React suspense. It's all coming in the near future. I'm very stoked for that, but for now, yeah, it's totally cool to do that. So now let's open the console first, and then let's save the page. So we have our console, and let's save the page, and let's get our data. So we're saving the page and we're getting our data. So what we have is exactly what we have stored here. Our data where keys are unique IDs and values are objects, which have title, and title is our actual to-dos. So what we need to do is we need to extract somehow these strings, these to-dos. And to do that, we need to first extract these objects, save it as an array, and we'll just say const to-dos equals to object.values. So object.values, this will extract these objects, and then we can map through it. We'll say to do, we'll say return us to do.title. So this will extract these strings. That's exactly what we need. And let's console it out and see what we get. To do's, I save the page, and you see I get array of our to do's, just what we need. And now it's time to set our state with the setter set to do list, passing the array to do's. This setter. Now this will do, it will save the to do's to our state and will render it out as an unordered list. But watch for a second, watch here on the right in the console, watch what's gonna happen right now. I'm gonna save the page and watch. I'm saving the page, you see all our to-dos are being rendered, and you see this infinite loop, this constant logging, okay? It is an infinite loop, and why is it happening? What's the reason? So the thing is, the most important thing to understand about useEffect is that this function passed as a first argument without a second argument, just like this, will always run on every complete render cycle, meaning every time our component mounts and every time our component updates. So what is happening here? Our component mounts, our state is an empty array, right? It's an empty array. Then our component mounted, the render cycle is completed, and this function runs. This function runs and it sets the state with an array of 4 items. Component updates, and that means the render cycle is complete again, and that means this function is run again. This function is run again. The state is set to new value, even though the to-dos are the same, everything's the same, it still is an update. It still is a new render cycle which is complete, which causes this function to run again and again and again and again. So that is an infinite loop. and that is what's happening. If we only want to run this function once when our component mounts, all we need to do is we need to pass an empty array as the second argument to this useEffect function. And now what's gonna happen is, if we're gonna uncomment it out, save it, and you see that no more infinite loop, this function is ran, our to-dos are rendered, and that's what we needed. That's how we imitate what's in class component is done within lifecycle method component did mount. Now, what if we want to rerun this function when our component updates? For example, we add new to do, right? Let's say bring t, right? And we want our component to update and then this function to run again, right? What is done in class components with component did update functionality? Well, first thing we need to do is we need to update this component, because now when we submit a new to do, what happens is we just make a post request to our database. So technically our component is not updating, right? So we need to make sure our component updates. So to do that, we just say, let's bring another piece of state. Let's say const new to do, set new to do equals to use state. Use state and pass empty string as an initial state. So now let's open React Dev Tools. Let's save it, and you see we're gonna get a new piece of state, right? You see we have state empty string. Now we need to update our component when we submit a new to do. So we can just set the state to whatever value is we type here, right? So for example, let's say down here in handle at to do function, we just say set new to do and we pass to do. And now look, watch here, what's gonna happen. We say task2. Oops, 1 second. Did I save it? No, I didn't save it. And now I say task2. You see task2. I say test, test, test. And you see it all changes, meaning our component updates now. Now, why is it useful, and what should we do with it? Okay, so we have this array, the second argument. The second argument is actually in useEffect, is actually an array of values React will look at every time the render cycle is completed, meaning every time our component either mounts or updates. And if any of those values changed, then this function, React, will run this effect function. If none of these values will change, this function will not run. So we want component did update functionality in function components, right? So meaning we need to pass here the value that will change, the value that will let React know that component updated, and that value is this piece of state that will always change. Okay. And this piece of state is new to do. So we just add new to do right here. And now every time our component updates, React will look at this value, new to do. And if this value is changed, then this effect will rerun, meaning the fetch to do will rerun and will refetch our to dos with the new to do that we just submitted. Let's look at the example. It'll be more clear. So let's say add new to do, let's say code again. I post it, you see the value changed, the state changed, React look at it, okay, it changed, that this function needs to rerun again. This function reran, and we have our to do rendered. Let's add more and more stuff. See, it's all working. Yep, that's how you pretty much do the component did update functionality in React. This is not the perfect way of handling all of this thing. It's not the best approach, but just to demonstrate you know, I think you guys understand how it works. And just to give you another example, We can have multiple use effects in one component. It's not a problem. So let's bring another use effect. This time let's look how we can change the DOM, because you know that changing the DOM manually is a side effect, right? We need to use it inside this use effect hook. So let's say we want to change this title, right? It says React app. Let's say we want to display how many to-dos we have to do, like what is the quantity of all these to-dos. So we say document dot title equals to you have to-do list dot length things to do. Now here, similarly to here, to this effect, we are passing the values that React will look at before running this effect. And in this case, we can just pass to-do list.length. So in React will look, okay, if right now the length is, I don't know, 14 items, right? When we submit to do, the length changes. All these to-dos are set. All these to-dos that we fetch are set. And if we add another one, the length changes, then this function runs again, right? Let's just save it real quick and let's look at right here. You have 14 things to do, and we add one more. You have 15 things to do. You have 16, you have 17 things to do. So that's how you do the component did update. Because component updates, this value changes, and that's when this effect will run. Yeah, and just to recap, the first argument is the effect. Whatever it is, it's either fetching the data or setting the subscription or changing the DOM. This is the first function, the first argument, and the second argument is an array. If it's an empty array, then this function will only run once. Component did mount. And if it has values, then these values are likely to change, and React will look at these values, and if any of those values change, then this effect will rerun again. Component did update functionality. Now let's look at component will and mount functionality in function component. Let's bring another use effect. Let's say use effect, and let's register an event listener. Window.add event listener. We're gonna be listening for resize, and the handle resize will be the handler. And that's actually let's create this handler. Let's say const handle resize. For now, let's just put a placeholder. So let's say I want to determine which device the user is using. Okay, I want to render out the name of the device. So either based on the size of the screen of the window, I want to determine what device the user is using. Like here in our component, let's add horizontal rule. Let's say P, and let's say, for example, you are using device, right? So here you are using device. Instead of this device, I want to show what device the user is using. So let's bring another piece of state. Let's say const window width set window width equals to use state, and the initial state will be window.inner width. And it's only, by the way, cool to read from this API. It's not a side effect. Okay, so the handle resize, what it will do, it will just set window width to whatever window.inner width is, and yeah, we have our effect. Okay, later on I'm going to show you how to do the cleanup, but for now let's actually render the name of device, and for that we need a function that will do that for us. We'll call it device equals to arrow function if, and we're gonna read from this state now, if window width is less than, let's say, 480, then return phone. Else if window width is less than 768, then gonna return a tab. tablet, and else we're gonna return a desktop. Okay, we have our function, and we just need to render whichever device it is, whichever. We open curly braces and we say, oops, we call device like this as a function. Now we save it, and let's look right here. You're using tablet, now you're using phone, and you're using desktop. Okay, now this effect requires cleanup, right? Just like a subscription, just like set interval, all of these things, they require cleanup. Even though in our case this is a top component, right, an app component, but for smaller component it will be really bad for performance if we don't unregister event listeners. So we always need to do that. In class components, for that we have component will and mount, but in function components it's all done within also useEffect. How it's done? Very nicely. We just return a function, and whatever is in this function will be the cleanup. Okay, like in our case, window.remove event listener, say resize, and handle resize. So that is how we do the component cleanup. When our component will unmount, then our event listener resize, for resize, handle resize will be removed. That's pretty much it. Let's double check. Let's see if it's working. Looks like everything's working. Hopefully I covered everything, at least the most important stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful day or night. Bye.